What we do here is go
It's your man, I Do It Barber, back with another tutorial. And in this video, this was a very impromptu video. This client walked in, he came to get a haircut, and I immediately was like, I gotta do a tutorial. So he gave me actually free reign to do whatever I want. And I love clients like this because it just makes, that's what makes barbering more fun. So I'm starting off with my 5-0 blade. For those of you that are curious, I'm just using it to bald out, and it appears that we're doing a drop fade, and that's what we're doing. So I'm taking my 1.5, and I've never done this before, guys. I've never faded hair like this, so this is kind of interesting too. I figured, why not do something different under these circumstances? So I used the 1.5 to create a 2-inch guideline, which I've never done that before. Typically it's the OA, then 1.5, but I used the 1.5. Now I have the 1A on, and I'm going right underneath that 1.5. And now I have the 1 blade on, and I'm going right underneath that 1A blade. Now you'll notice, like in a lot of people that get drop fades, they have those indentions or lumps right there where it transitions to the back of the head or by the occipital bone. He has those too. So you have to create the illusion and go in there, go up a little bit higher than what you used before, and lighten up some of those spots. So I'm just coming in with the 1, clearing out some space, and then now I'll be coming, well, okay, looks like I went back with the 1.5 just to tidy up that initial guideline, because when you're fading with guidelines, or if you're going off of some sort of guide, you need to make sure that your guide is clear and visible. So that's what all I did. Now I've got the adjustables all the way open, and I'm going right underneath where I went with the 1 blade. So then after this, you're gonna see me close this blade halfway, and I'm going right underneath the blade open, the adjustables open. And it's pretty simple. You're just walking right down the ladder, making sure you don't go up into your prior zone. And if you do, just use your corners and knock at it with the corners, and it should get it right out. And right here, I've got the blade almost closed, and I'm just hitting that, going right under and lightening up the contrast of that bottom line. You can see it's still there, and see now it's closed, and I'm using the corners to attack that bottom line. And he also told me on the beard I can do pretty much anything I wanted, but he just wanted to let the beard go, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So as you see, the fade is coming out good. Now if you notice at the beginning of this tutorial, his hair in the bottom, I don't know who cut his hair before, but it was a lot different. The density was kind of weird, so I was just like, let me do a drop fade, because I'm not even gonna attempt to mess with that hair that's there. It just looks too wacky for me. So I was like, a drop fade I think would look good on him with his head shape and everything. So now I've got the 3.5 blade on, and I'm going up about 2 inches above where I left off with the 1.5. So you could already see the contrast change just by me using that 3.5. And I'm just clearing out the bulk here. And then now I have the 2 blade on, so I'm going right underneath, and you could probably see the line that I created with that 3.5. And you see me with the 2 blade going right underneath that, and that's all I'm doing. This is very simple. When you fade down, it's actually a very simple and quick process. So for any of you guys out there that want to attempt to fade down, I actually highly recommend it, because it's actually a really quick process in fading down. So now I got the 1.5 on, if you're keeping track, and I'm just tidying up some spots. And you see here, I slapped on the 1A, and I hit the corners of those shadows there, so I can create the illusion that is all faded. See, now as a barber, you don't want to just leave that. I mean, as a barber, if barbers look at that, we understand what that is. But to the untrained eye, they would just think you just left a dark patch in their hair. That's your job as a barber, especially if you're skilled enough to take care of things like this and create the illusion. And here's one thing I do with fading a lot. I'll go through and use my system. I'll use whatever system that I plan on using for whatever haircut I'm doing. But then I'll come back in and I'll detail later. So some people, they fade and they detail as they go. Some people, they'll run through their system so they don't just get stuck on one single thing and then come back to another. So now I'm using scissor over comb to connect the sides into the top there. It's pretty simple process. Well, I wouldn't say pretty simple for most people using scissor over comb. It could be quite dangerous, a little bit different for some. Now, on the beard here, I'm starting off just by knocking down the bulk, and I'm using the 1.5. And I started with the 1.5 because I didn't know how dark or light his beard might be if I used the 1.5. So I used that as a gauge to see how I need to attack his beard. So now that I know this, I'm gonna go in with my adjustables. I went open and I went half and close to knock out that line there, but I'm also kind of tweaking his beard a little bit more, trying to drop it down. Like I said, I did not have any idea of what I wanted to do to his hair while I was cutting it. I was just basically cutting as I go, just to give you guys an idea. So now I've got the 2 blade on because he wanted a little bit thicker through the goatee area, so I decided to use the 2, and then I'm using the 1.5 on his mustache, just for those of you guys that are curious if you want to recreate this look or know how I actually go about this. So if I were to actually explain everything that I did on his beard, it could be quite complicated because I used the adjustables open, halfway then closed. I used the 1A blade at one point. I used the 1.5 and the 2. So it wasn't like I used one particular blade all over at one length. I did actually do some fading. So now I'm going to start throwing a soft little line on here. Nothing too drastic. I do come back in here with the razor and clean this up because after I finished his haircut, I did give him a shampoo and a facial, and then I cleaned him up with the razor. But you'll see at the end result, you'll see how much cleaner it looks once everything is said and done. So I'm keeping his beard as high as possible here and just being real easy right now. Nothing too crazy because, like I said, I'm coming back with the razor. There's no point for me to go loco on his beard because I'm coming back with the razor. And he's a pretty low maintenance guy. When I did the consultation with him, he said he wears hats literally all the time. He doesn't wear anything to style his hair. He just puts a hat on. So I was like, that's why I was so motivated to do this haircut. And I was juiced when he came in. He was like, yo, you can do whatever you want, you know, blah, blah, blah. I was like, I got you. So I told him, I was like, I'm gonna hook you up. I'm gonna make you want to use product. I'm gonna make you not wear your hat. So I was motivated to give him a good cut here. So you saw that. And obviously, as you see, I did a 50-50 fade on this. Typically, I don't 50-50 fade. I think the last sort of 50-50 fade I did was the Masters versus Magic Clips versus Fast Feed video. If you haven't seen that, I'll throw a link in the description. But I decided to do it here on this video, mainly because I haven't found the right camera angle that I can turn the person in the chair and keep them in the frame the entire time. Usually when I'm cutting, if you watch my tutorials, I'll cut and I'll turn the chair, then I have to move the camera and then cut some more and then go to the other side, move the camera. So I just decided, let me just 50-50 fade. So I'll just do one side where I don't have to move the camera at all until it's time for me to do the other side. That's why I actually did just one side of his face. If you notice, I did one half of his beard and the one half of the haircut, and then I went to the other side. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, you'll see a video that I did or showed of this haircut where it was like one side and then the other. So you actually get to see one side and the other and how drastic of a transformation this really was. So all I'm doing here, I did the same thing like I did on the other side. 1.5, I started up, then I dropped down to the 1A, but now I have the adjustables open, which I actually should have went to the 1 blade. And I noticed that once I went to the back of his hair, because when I went up and made my first stroke, you'll see here right there, I noticed, I was like, whoops, let me put the 1 blade on because it took off too much. Now my 1 blade is slightly longer than my MV's open. Typically the MV's open is the equivalent of a 1 blade, but seeing how my MV's are 0 gapped, it took some of the length off of the lever open. So that's all I'm doing. And I noticed something too, and I'm not sure if you guys can see it. The right side of his head is harder to fade than the left side. The left side was a lot easier. You can see on the side, the right side of his head, it's sort of patchy. And that's, if you look at the video in the beginning, you'll notice that bottom portion of his haircut, or whoever cut it, it looks very awkward because there was a very distinct weight line that you saw in that separation of hair. So I already knew that was going to be a challenge. So I was like, instantly, I was like, drop fade. without a doubt. I was like, I'm not going to do a tape or anything like that. I was like, I don't want to do a mid ball fade. I was like, I think a drop fade would look good. So same thing like I did on the other side. I'm just going half middle closed to knock out this bottom line. And like I said, when I do this, I just go in, create my initial work, you know, with pretty nice canvas. Then I'll come back and detail later. So now this is the 3.5, doing the same thing, going up 2 inches above the 1.5 to create this sort of guideline, if you will, where I can actually see what's going on. Sorry for the blur in the camera there. So I'm just making sure I get all the hair. So when it's time for me to come back in with the 2, it's good. It's pretty easy. So, you know, after the 2, I come back with the 1.5. And then after the 1.5, I'm coming back with the 1A. Very simple process. Just walk right down the ladder. And as you can see, I'm just trying to tie both sides together where they actually make sense. So as you see here, I got the one blade on and I'm using the corners to go in here and tie this fade together. And I know a lot of people will be like, man, how do you 50-50 fade? That seems like it will be tricky to make sure both sides are symmetrical, make sure both sides are the same. It actually really isn't. If you have a system, especially if you fade with guidelines, it's actually really easy, especially if you fade with guidelines. Now, if you fade going down, that might be a little tricky, because if you mess up in one area, or even if you fade up, if you fade too high or something crazy, which you shouldn't when you're fading with guidelines, because that's the purpose of your guidelines, is to keep you within certain zones. But if you're fading down, it shouldn't be a problem. Well, it might be a problem. I take that back. It might be a problem because sometimes you might have to adjust something, the symmetry, especially of a drop fade, to keep that angle while you're fading down can be quite tricky. So as you can see there, fade doesn't look too bad, but like I said, I'm gonna come back and detail the fade. So I just wanted to make sure I got the fade in there, and then I'll just come back in detail. Now, my detail process, for those of you guys that are curious when I'm using blades, whether I'm fading with guidelines, whether I fade going down or fading up, whatever, I have a lot of different fade techniques. So if you watch my videos, you'll see me using different fade techniques and different cutting styles when I'm cutting hair. So that's the beauty of this channel. I don't just fade one way. You get many different aspects and looks at how I fade. So what I do is in the cleanup is I'll literally, and this takes no time at all, what I do is I just run the blades down in order where I see fit. So if I know, let's say the highest point I used was a 3.5, and let's say the zone of the 3.5 looks good, I'll ignore that. And let's say what requires my attention is the 1.5 area and below. What I'll do is I'll grab my 1.5, my 1A, my 1, my OA, triple out, whatever. And then I'll just run down the ladder until the fade is clean, and I'll just clean it up that way. So that's how I clean up. So that's, if you look at his fade here, I'm going to use the 2, 1.5, 1A, 1, and maybe my, yeah, it looks like I think I did use my adjustables. So I don't show you too much of the cleanup, but I show you a little bit of the cleanup. So on the beard, like I said, he wants it high. Keep it symmetrical. I'm using the corners of my slim lines. These are slightly zero gap. They're not like completely zero gap. They're gapped well enough to where I can get a pretty good line on most people. And I love these little things. They're lightweight, cordless. I love cordless clippers. I mean, look, I'm using the Envies, I'm using the slim lines, I'm using the Super ZRs, all cordless. So I mean, you know, you get the picture. So I'm just doing this neckline. And he actually has a pretty decent beard too. You know, it's surprised he doesn't come in and get it cut more often. So now I'm just doing this mustache. So now I'm using a slide cutting technique, because on the top, I didn't want to take any length off. So I'm using a slide cutting technique, and I'm using thinning shears, by the way. Typically I'd use my 7-inch shears to do this. His hair is slightly thin on top. He's thinning a little bit. So I didn't want to come in with 7-inch shears and somehow take off more of his hair. I didn't want to do that. So that I used the thinning shears to do that. And I'm also going to style him out with some, like a beach sea salt spray in his hair, and it adds a little bit more texture and volume to his hair. You'll see at the end there. So now all I'm doing is, like I told you earlier, my cleanup work. I'm just coming in and I'm detailing any dark spots. I'm using my mirror, as you see there, using the mirror, turning them, looking at the fade, seeing what requires my attention. And the detail work is very simple. If, like I said in my videos, I make videos talking about understanding blades and understanding like how to fade and things like that. If you could look at the hair and determine what needs to be done at what length and what area of the hair, you'll be good to go. And that's the cut. So let me know what you guys think. Transformation, you see the little texture that it brought out in this hair, it was just that spray alone. You know, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget, share, like, comment these videos. I have plenty of great barbering content, so browse the channel. There's a lot more coming, and there's a lot more on the way. I appreciate you guys for watching. If you guys found this helpful, leave your comment. Let me know what you think of this haircut and if you learned anything from this in the comments below. But I'm gonna get out of here. It has been your man, I Do It Barber. I'm signing out, and I will holla. And don't forget, everything I used in this video will be in the description below. I'm out.